Hey all. So this is the Spotlight with Context for Kate Bishop, who is the second champion that I built. I am very excited about this one. Her development took a very different path than Absorbing Man's because she started more with a gameplay idea, perfect release, and then trick arrows, whereas Absorbing Man was more aimed at war, but I'm really, really happy with where she ended up. I don't think she's going to be for everyone. The perfect release mechanic is easier than it used to be, but it is still pretty challenging. But if you are at all okay with that, I encourage you to try her because I do think that she's incredibly fun to play. So, starting with base stats and abilities, I want to call out that her health is actually much, much higher than a lot of other characters with the small female body type. She does not have a lot of armor. She has no resistances, including crit resistance. So if you eat a combo, it's going to hurt. But she can block pretty well. She has very high block proficiency. Um, and she will feel like she's taking a bit less damage from damage over time effects like bleed or poison or any of that because she just has a bit more health to chew through. It's not a super high health pool, but it actually is a little bit more than Absorbing Man, which makes me chuckle a bit. Her attack is characteristically quite high. She is kind of on the glass cannon model. I just toned down the glass side of things a bit. And then her prestige is high because she's new, but it's not that high. If I remember correctly, I think she's about even with Gallon, so that puts her in the top 20, but not the top 10. It's fine. You can rank her and not feel bad about it, but if you're going for top 5, she's not who you're looking for. So for her strengths, the first thing to cover is just that she has very high passive damage over time. She has access to a lot of red numbers through both the Cold Snap and this Caltrops effect, which we'll talk about later. It is somewhat gated behind Perfect Release. You do have to play well to access her damage, but once it's there, you don't have to worry about it getting shrugged off or anything like that. The opponent is going to feel it. Additionally, she has very easy access to a tracking debuff on her heavy, kind of like how Hawkeye has very easy access to slow. So she's a really solid miss counter as long as you can land that first heavy. And through that same cold snap, she is really good at shutting down evade. Additionally, she even has true accuracy on her special attacks so that you don't have that experience some of you may remember with Iceman, where you lose your cold snap against, say, like a stun immune Spider Man. This is a deep memory I have from the early game. And then now you're just kind of throwing the special and hoping it sticks because the cold snap is gone. Kate does not have that problem with the true accuracy. So the other big thing that Kate can do is a bit more nebulous. It's not like a hard RPG key or a mechanic, but she has several different things that allow her to control the arena better than most other champions. She can get easy intercepts, easy openings, easy heavies, and she is very good at backing the opponent up to the wall. All of which work very well for her kit, but all of which also just come in handy for certain kinds of fights when you are not enjoying being backed up by an aggressive opponent, for instance. So I really enjoy that part of her. Now, on the weaknesses side of things, she's great at finding openings, but while she has a counter to evade and miss, she doesn't do anything to counter unstoppable, and several of her tools do rely on the ability to stun the opponent. So, immunity to stun or any kind of unstoppable effect just really cramps down on her tempo and is going to make it much harder to use her. Additionally, if her opponent is immune to Cold Snap right away, that's a big damage hit. You can often get around Cold Snap immunity if they can bleed by using the Caltrops effect and playing around it a bit. But an opponent that's immune to both Cold Snap and bleed, like say Warlock or Iceman after his buff, is going to dramatically slow her down. Additionally, one of Kate's best ways of finding her openings is using an evade in the same style as Elsa Bloodstone's. And so any opponent who just turns off evades, such as Mole Man or Null, is going to cause her some problems. You can still absolutely use her, but it makes things harder. So, getting into the abilities themselves, we just mentioned it, but the first thing to note is this riposte ability. Kate is, of course, a fencer as well as an archer, and so I kind of wanted to nod to that with when you parry her, she gets the last laugh because she can purify the stun debuff, evade, and counterattack. This obviously is moderately annoying on defense, but it is also pretty powerful on offense because it means that you can use her against an encroaching stun lane or against somebody like Overseer who has that auto block, and she's still going to be able to survive and do well in the fight even after being parried. It's very nice for that. She also has access to this counterattack evade when she performs a well-timed block against basics, same as with Elsa, like I said. And then when she evades, she's always going to counterattack. That is just how evade animations work. If we hook up one to some evades, we hook it up to all evades. And so this does mean that she might be a bit annoying on some defensive nodes with evade, but it is only on her personal evades, these two that you see right here when she is attacked while stunned or when she well-timed blocks, that she inflicts a passive stun through this taser arrow effect. Now, the reason it's a passive stun is because the counter to it is not supposed to be using a shrug champion. There are several different ways to counter this ability if that's what you're concerned about with her on defense. You can use somebody who stops purification in the first place. You can use somebody who replaces a purified stun debuff with a passive stun, or who just uses a passive stun in the first place, like Magneto House of X. You can use somebody who is an evade counter, like Null or Mole Man, like I mentioned earlier. And you can also use somebody who is just stun immune, or has access to some kind of evade or miss themselves so that she doesn't land that hit that would stun. So there are all of those ways to deal with this ability, but the way that I do not want you to counter it is just by shrugging it off with another skill champion. Now, this stun is removed when the opponent is struck twice. What that means is that you can go in for a 5-hit combo, the stun will just go away somewhere in the middle of it. You can go in for a medium and then follow up with a special attack. You can also go for a medium and charge your heavy, and you will safely land the first hit of the heavy, the stun goes away, but then the rest of the heavy also lands. It's for allowing that heavy that this is 2 hits, that's the important part. But because it's removed after the second hit, you can't do any weird combo extended shenanigans, like doing medium, medium, and then the stun still being there and doing another full combo. That's not because I don't like fun, but it's because I didn't want to have to take that into account in her power budget, because she has some other cool stuff elsewhere I didn't want to get in the way of. Additionally, whenever she inflicts this passive stun, her personal evades are going to go on a cooldown. This is again similar to Elsa. After you do the cool counterattack thing, you have to wait before doing it again. And if you are fighting an opponent that's stunning you constantly, you only get a freebie every 10 seconds. So dialed in, this section is going to read very similarly to the same one in Hawkeye's kit. The wording has been updated for clarity in a couple places, but the mechanic is pretty similar. So during a special 1 or 2, after the first hit lands, if you want to, you can press the block input, by which I mean the left side of the screen, and it will slow down time. It's a pretty dramatic time dilation. And then when you release the input, time speeds back up. And if you release this input exactly as Kate releases the arrow, which is going to be indicated by a glint on the arrowhead on screen, then you get a perfect release bonus, which is going to give you other benefits, but in particular is going to allow you to get a dialed in passive. If you land perfectly in the green on the special 3 minigame, you also get this. That means that you, of course, cannot do that on a 3 or 4 star, or I guess a 2 star. That is for 5 stars and up, but it will give you the dialed in passive just the same. So dialed in passives increase the duration of effects inflicted by trick arrows by 10%. That part is the same as Hawkeye. Failing to activate a perfect release bonus removes one dialed in passive. Not all of them, just one. That part is different from Hawkeye. However, to start, these only stack up to 2, so you can only get 2 of these passives. We'll see more of that in the SIG. And then as a defender, Kate has a scaling chance with her missing health to activate a perfect release bonus. This normally won't matter, but it does mean that sometimes you're going to see the perfect release call out on her side of the screen, and you really do not want to get hit by that particular special attack. So, trick arrows. Kate has access to 4 different trick arrows, and she uses one of them on both her special 1 and her special 2. By default, these effects last for 12 seconds, although we already saw dialed in passives can extend that duration. They stack up to twice, and they get some kind of bonus from being activated with a perfect release. So Kate is going to start with the cryo arrow ready, and you're going to have a little gray indicator on her side of the screen that tells you which arrow is currently active. And then whenever she finishes a special attack, that arrow cycles forward in order. Additionally, you can cycle forward in that same order that we'll see in the next section by double tapping block. If you don't want to start with the cryo arrow, you can pick a different starting arrow in the pre-fight menu. Picking any arrow, including cryo, in the pre-fight menu will disable the automatic cycling after special attacks so that you only cycle by double tapping block. This is very useful if you are trying to get maximum damage out of cold snaps at the beginning, or if you feel like you really need tranquilize, which we'll get to, and want to stack up all of that before moving on to another arrow. Additionally, striking the opponent while they're recovering from a heavier special attack is going to pause all trick arrow effects for 5 seconds. This is very similar to OG Black Panther pausing his Panther's Might. And then as a defender, the trick arrows deal 75% less damage. So they do scale with modified attack, but they are much weaker on defense, so that a stray cold snap doesn't just delete you. So the actual arrow effects themselves, the cryo arrow inflicts a cold snap passive. As a reminder, cold snap deals energy damage and prevents evade. It's not a reduction in evade ability accuracy, it just prevents evade. So this will work even against increased ability accuracy reduction or somebody like Mordo who is immune to certain types of ability accuracy reduction. And if you get perfect release on a cryo arrow, then it becomes a critical cold snap passive, and the damage is multiplied by whatever her critical damage multiplier is. This also means that if you increase her critical damage, you increase the damage of the critical cold snap. So the tranquilizer inflicts a 40% tranquilize debuff. So as a reminder, tranquilize is to debuffs what neutralize is to buffs. It is just going to make debuffs coming from the opponent less likely to trigger in the first place. It's not a purify, it just affects it before the debuff even happens. And if you land perfect release, then you get plus 25% potency. So I just want to talk about nomenclature real here. That plus 25 indicates that this is a flat increase. So the 40% becomes 65%. So if you get a perfect release even on an unduped Kate Bishop, then you are reducing the chance of your opponent's debuffs landing on you by 65%. So land 2 of these and you get up over 100. Additionally, if you get 1 perfect release and 1 not perfect release, then you're over 100, which was one of the things that I wanted to be possible. So next up we have the Caltrops arrow. This is not just the Caltrops node. I understand that it does bring up memories of that, but this is a bit different. This is supposed to be her scattering caltrops on the field, making it harder to move both forward and backward. So while this effect is on the opponent, them dashing either forward or backward is going to inflict an instant bleed. It should only happen once each time they do that, but it basically is going to penalize your opponent for trying to move around the arena. Additionally, if you land this with a perfect release, that damage is also applied when they charge their heavy attack, which is something that Kate likes for them to do anyway, because as I mentioned, she has good block proficiency, and she pauses her trick arrow effects when she punishes a heavy attack. So you can get really good damage and uptime on your arrow effects by baiting heavies, inflicting this caltrops damage, and then smacking them and pausing the effects. And then the last arrow is the Dissolver arrow. This inflicts a fragility debuff, which is going to increase Kate's critical damage rating as she's striking the opponent, so this does affect the Cold Snap passive, and reduces their block proficiency by 40%. If you land this with perfect release, the fragility doesn't get any better, but you also get a non-stacking Sunder passive, which just removes your opponent's critical resistance. So you can be fighting Rintra, Doom, Killmonger, I'm not sure I'd recommend Killmonger, Absorbing Man, and you won't be landing any crits at all, probably, on the way to this effect, but then you land it, you stack the Sunder, and you're going to start actually landing critical hits. It's very fun. Then the next thing I want to talk about is that, like I mentioned, Kate has some tools for getting the opponent to the far wall, and she really wants to do that because of this section here. While the opponent's back is to the wall, they're more likely to launch special attacks. This is not explicitly a taunt. Annihilus doesn't go crazy when applied with it. People who are immune to taunt aren't immune to this. But it does make them throw a special attack more often. It also is not a weakness the way that taunt is. It doesn't reduce their attack. It's just supposed to bait out specials. But one of the reasons that you want them to throw specials more often while you're at the wall is so that you don't have to have them chase you all the way across the map, baiting out that special attack. You want them to throw it right away so that you can punish it, pause the trick arrow effects, and then take advantage of this next bullet, which is that if a heavy attack knocks the opponent into the wall, meaning if they stand up close to their wall, all trick arrow effects are refreshed, both on you and on the opponent, and the opponent is inflicted with a crush passive for 2 seconds. So a reminder, crush is basically the debuff, or in this case passive, form of unblockable, meaning that while your opponent is crushed, you are unblockable. So this allows Kate to throw a heavy attack that knocks the opponent into the wall, refresh all of her effects, and then instantly charge in after it and get what is usually called a wake-up intercept, or just immediately throw a special attack if you have one ready. I personally really enjoy this because you can refresh all of your trick arrow effects and then start moving on to the next one. I love this effect. Huge credit to my colleague Kabam Shio, who suggested something particularly cool after knocking the opponent down, and this crush passive I owe to him. So again, fitting into this theme of being good at and wanting to get your opponent to the far wall, if you charge Kate's heavy attack for more than a second, it knocks the opponent back further. I will admit this is a little bit difficult to notice on the map itself, just because of the camera angle. It doesn't look that much further, but it is a real extra distance, and it is helpful at getting them backed up more. Additionally, this is part of why her passive stuns look so long, because they give you time to fully charge the heavy. It's otherwise fairly difficult to get a fully charged heavy in a lot of fights, but those passive stuns do the trick. And then her heavy attacks, like I mentioned, also have a parallel to Hawkeye's slow, in that they inflict a non-stacking tracking debuff, which is just going to turn off miss. so she's quite good at handling those annoying science miss champions. So, her special attacks, like I said, just always have passive true accuracy. You don't need to do anything for it. It's just you activate the special. You are going to bypass evade and auto block, unless, of course, you're fighting Penny Parker. This is going to make it much easier to land your trick arrows. So, like I said, you're not going to have to worry about landing Cold Snap against an evading opponent. You can just throw it. For this special one, text is very simple. The last hit is a trick arrow. Doesn't really do anything else, but it doesn't need to, because we talked about a whole bunch of abilities on the way here. This is going to be your primary way of stacking up dialed-in passives and applying trick arrows in most fights. The special 2 gives you another trick arrow on the second hit and can apply through block. Keep an eye out for that on defense. A perfect release is also going to inflict 2 of whatever trick arrow effect you're looking at. Now, this is only going to give you 1 dialed-in passive, so a special 2 just for ramping her is not as efficient as 2 special 1s, but the last hit is going to do this putty arrow effect, which is going to apply another passive stun, similar to the one from her Riposte feature, and so that is the reason to use the special 2. You still ramp your trick arrows, you're getting some progress on your dialed-in, and you have this nice long stun so that you can fully charge your heavy and try and knock your opponent back into the wall, and refresh all arrow effects. The special 3, as per usual, is more of a long fight ramp attack. You're going to get a cruelty passive from it that lasts for 12 seconds. If you get a perfect release, you also get a pretty chunky precision. Both of these count as trick arrow effects. They are extended by the dialed-in passives. They are paused when you punish heavies and specials. They are refreshed when you knock the opponent down into the wall. So they're all going to help those kinds of things. The cruelty passive has obvious synergy with the cold snap passive because it's going to increase your critical damage multiplier. The precision is also very good when you take into account the fact that fragility is going to be boosting your crits even beyond this cruelty, and that you have access to a sunder to remove critical resistance, so then the opponent is actually going to feel every bit of her boosted critical rating. You can start landing a fair number of yellow numbers with this. So her signature ability is where things really start taking off. At Sig 1, you're going to get access to another dialed-in passive. They now stack up to 3. At Sig 100, that becomes 4. At Sig 200, that becomes a total of 5 dialed-in passives. So that means you have access to up to 50% extra duration. Her trick arrow effects can be 18 seconds instead of 12, giving you much more time to pause and refresh them. And the dialed-in passives are now going to increase the potency of them as well. At Sig 200, that effect is 15%. Multiplied across 5 dialed-in passives, the effects can become 75% more potent. This is where her ceiling starts getting scary, honestly. Because we talked earlier about how unduped Kate Bishop has access to 2 perfect release tranquilizers that are each 65% for a total tranquilized potency of 130. Duped Kate Bishop at max Sig with 5 dialed-in passives increases that 65% by a non-flat 75%. So you multiply 65 by 1.75. And if I remember roughly off the top of my head, that gives you a total tranquilized potency of almost 250%. And that same kind of math is going to apply to the fragilities, and to the cruelty, and to the cold snaps, which are then further boosted by the boosted fragilities and cruelties. So you have to spend a lot of bars of power and not miss a perfect release to hit that ceiling. And it's probably not going to help you in a lot of fights. I noticed that even in the deep dive fight against Labyrinth Red Hulk, it didn't look like Karate Mike had hit that ceiling, and he was still doing plenty. So I don't think you have to worry about that ceiling, but I am calling out that it is there, and it is quite high. And then lastly, her signature ability is going to allow you to pause trick arrow effects while you are hitting into the opponent's block for up to 2 seconds at Sig 200. This is for a variety of reasons, but it's just supposed to make maintenance easier. She already likes hitting into block because she can lower the opponent's block proficiency, but this is also just something that I found myself wanting while I was testing her. If I was baiting out heavies, if I was trying to get the opponent to give me access to a well-timed block so I could use my riposte, either of those activities, I found myself hitting into their block. This also backs them up. It's just there's a lot of synergy with the rest of her kit when you get a benefit out of hitting their block, and I wanted to reward you for that. So then all that's left is her synergies, and I really like these. The one with America Chavez is definitely the strongest for Kate, because it increases the stack limit of her trick arrows by 1, so from 2 to 3. So everything I said about her scary ceiling with the Sig gets taken that much further by this synergy. That is why it is 6-star and up only. And then for America Chavez, she is going to reduce the duration of the opponent's indestructible and regen buffs by 40% for each unique parallel dimension. Reminder, she has 3 of those, and so fully ramped, she's just going to stop those buffs. Unless, of course, the opponent has some kind of boosted buff duration, in which case this will still go a little bit further than 100% to eat into it. Also, even if you only have 2, reducing indestructible and regen by 80% can go a very long way, especially for a mystic with access to mystic dispersion. The most obvious target for this is, of course, Hulkling, because he has both of these effects, but indestructible also shows up on nodes, and there are a number of other characters with annoying regen buffs, such as the infamous Iron Man, who's very popular in incursions right now. You have Gore, whose regen is very annoying. This would shut him down entirely. And then Angela and King Groot aren't the scariest defenders, but this would be very good for them as well. Moving on to the partner synergy, Kate's side of this is going to give you 2 extra dialed-in passives on the Special 2, which means it actually becomes more efficient at ramping than the Special 1. Pretty fun. Hawkeye is going to basically rebuild the way his dialed-in passives work to more closely match Kate's, so now missing one of them doesn't reset you to 0, it just drops you by 1. Additionally, this was called out in the patch notes, but Hawkeye's perfect release window has been expanded to match Kate's. His used to be only 7/100ths of a second, it is now a full 1/10 of a second. And I realize that that sounds like a laughably small increase, but that means it is 50% wider, and trust me, from playing Hawkeye on my live account, and then playing Kate on my developer account, you can feel the difference. And so I'm really excited about that buff to him. And then for Ronan, this is really, really strong, because Ronan has access to a lot of damage. He's a really strong character if you figure out how to play him properly, but one of the things holding him back is that for him to access 100% defensive ability accuracy reduction, he basically has to spam special 1s, which entirely gives up the high damage available to him on his special 2 and 3. This synergy allows him to toggle in and out of Wraith stance, which is his defensive ability accuracy reduction stance. To refresh that disorient, he gets off his special 1 without spamming it, so that you can actually maintain uptime on the utility while also going for damage. I expect this to be very, very good for him. Her next synergy, Ice Queens, applies to Emma, Elsa, Misty Knight, and Iceman, and this is all about applying frostbites when evade is prevented. There's a lot of text here, but that's what it comes down to. When the opponent fails to evade, you get a frostbite. The reason that there's more text than that is that Iceman and Misty Knight both do something with frostbites in their kit, so I had to clarify that they get a personal frostbite passive, and it interacts with everything else they do. So for Iceman, when he throws his heavy, the damage of this frostbite will be boosted accordingly, etc. With Misty, when her Cold Snap expires and all of her Frostbites detonate, this counts towards that. And then for Emma, Elsa, and Kate, they just get a more basic, generic Frostbite when they prevent an evade. And the Frostbite lasts for 10 seconds and does a decent chunk of energy damage when it expires. So this one isn't technically applied to just a Cold Snap, because some of these characters have other ways of preventing evade. Kate has the True Accuracy on her specials, that would trigger this. And Emma, of course, does not have Cold Snap, but she does have her Telepath form, which stops evade, and so that will still work for this. I honestly really wanted a way to give Emma Frost access to Frostbite. And so here we are. For the Young Avengers, this tag does now apply to all of these champions. I know some people noticed it on Cassie, but we did also add it to Wiccan, Hulkling, America Chavez, and Loki. And it just gives them all 5% extra combat power rate and an additional 500 block proficiency. Neither of these bonuses are massive, but you will feel them. The increased combat power rate, I think, is especially going to be noticeable on Hulkling because his base combat power rate is reduced so much in the first place. This is going to let him move from special to special much more easily. And then the block proficiency is just nice for literally everyone. It's half as strong as what a 5-star Guardian gives you, but people love that Guardian synergy, and you can feel this one as well. And then this last one, I've played a fair amount of Kamala Khan over the years for various reasons, including obviously the Karina's challenge where you have to take the champion with her. And my least favorite part of her kit has always been how long it takes to activate those Furies on her heavy. And so Kate just lets her have that time. Additionally, it's also going to make it significantly easier for Kate to fully charge her heavy and get the increased knockback damage because it drops it from a full second down to a half second. So really like that one for those two. And so that is Kate Bishop. I know this was a fairly long one again. I know it's truly surprising when I'm talking about a champion I built that I have more to say, but I'm just really excited about her finally coming to the game. She was a blast to build. The art department knocked it out of the park on this one. There's a lot going on with her arrows, and they did a great job. It might be a little bit less obvious that she has extra art stuff going on than Absorbing Man, who's glowing and changing colors and everything, but Kate's animations just look so great. So huge props on that one. And then thanks for the rest of the team on this one. This is kind of going outside the scope of one of these kinds of videos, but I had significantly less time to work on Kate than I did on Absorbing Man because my onboarding was done, right? I was now a full employee. And I felt that difference. And so I just really appreciate the rest of the team helping me refine her kit and get her going because I'm very happy with where she ended up. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one, learned something. Let me know in the comments what you're excited about, maybe what you're not excited about. And until next time, thanks so much for watching, and take care.